The taste of my own blood fills my mouth as I kneel in the snow outside Largashba's gates. My tusks ache where they struck the frozen ground. Behind me, I hear the heavy wooden doors grinding shut, and the sound is worse than any blade, worse than the beating, worse than the jeers of those I once called kin. That sound is the death of everything I was. My name no longer matters. The chief stripped it from me along with my armor, my weapons, and my right to call myself awesomer. I am nothing now, less than nothing. The code of Malacath demands it. And Malacath, in his cruel wisdom, always gets what he demands. I think about my mother in moments like this. She would be ashamed. No, she would be worse than ashamed. She would be silent. She would look through me the way she learned to look through all failures. That is what the Stronghold teaches. To cut away the parts of yourself that feel, so that the parts that remain can survive. I try to stand. My legs shake beneath me. 3 of my ribs are cracked. I can feel them grinding against each other with every breath. The chief's fists were thorough. He wanted everyone to see what happens to those who challenge and fail. He wanted them to remember. Looking at the blood steaming in the snow around me, I think they will. The wind cuts through my thin clothes like a blade. They left me a rough-spun tunic and nothing else. No boots, no cloak, no food. This is the mercy of the Stronghold, you understand. They could have killed me. The code would have permitted it. Instead, they chose something worse. They chose to let me live with what I have become. I start walking. I do not know where. It does not matter. Anywhere is better than here, kneeling in my own blood while my former brothers and sisters watch from the walls. I can feel their eyes on my back. Some of them pity me. Most do not. Pity is weakness, and the Orcsimer cannot afford weakness. Not in this world that hates us. Not in this Skyrim that sees us as beasts. My feet are already numb. The snow comes up past my ankles with every step. I make it perhaps 200 paces before I fall the first time. The cold reaches into my chest and squeezes. I think about staying down. I think about letting the ice take me. It would be faster than what waits ahead, but something in me refuses. Call it spite. Call it the last ember of orcish pride that even exile cannot extinguish. I push myself up. I keep walking. I do not look back. This is how it begins. This is how an orc dies without dying. This is the brutal truth of what it means to be cast out. Let me tell you how I came to kneel in that bloody snow. Let me tell you what I lost, and what losing it truly means. I was born in Largashba 32 winters ago, before anyone whispered that dragons could return. My mother was one of Chief Yamartz's wives. Not his favourite, but favoured enough. She had given him 3 sons before me, and that brought her standing among the other women. The stronghold was not large, perhaps 40 souls behind those timber walls. We had a longhouse, a mine, a forge, and little else. But it was ours. Every beam raised by orcish hands, every stone placed according to the old ways. When I was young, I thought those walls contained the entire world. Everything that mattered was inside. Everything outside was danger, or prey, or both. I learned to swing a hammer before I learned to speak in full sentences. This is the orcish way. Strength before words, deeds before thoughts. My mother taught me the basics of smithing while I was still small enough to sit on her hip. The heat of the forge became more familiar to me than sunlight. The ring of metal on metal became my lullaby. By my 10th winter, I could shape a passable blade. By my 15th, the chief himself wore armor I had helped forge. That was my pride, you see, my worth to the stronghold. I was not the strongest warrior. I was not the fiercest hunter. But I could make the tools that let others be those things, and in a stronghold, that matters. I remember the smell of the forge, hot metal and coal smoke, and the particular sweetness of orichalcum when it reaches the right temperature. I remember the rhythm of the hammer, steady as a heartbeat, shaping raw ore into something useful, something beautiful, even. There is a kind of meditation in smithing, a way of losing yourself in the work until nothing else exists. Those were the happiest hours of my life, though I did not know it then. The warriors respected me, in their way. They needed me. A blade without a smith is just a piece of metal waiting to break, and I needed them. Without warriors to use what I made, I would have had no purpose. We were bound together, all of us, in a web of mutual dependence that the code pretends does not exist. The code says only the strong matter. But the strong cannot survive without the clever, the skilled, the ones who build and mend and create. We lived by the code of Malacath. Every orc does, whether they know his name or not. The code is simple. It is brutal. It is the only law that has ever kept our people from destroying themselves. Strength determines leadership. The chief rules absolutely, but only for as long as he can defend that rule. His word is law, his will is the stronghold's will, and his blood, his sons, are the only ones permitted to continue his line. That last part is important, remember it. The chief takes all the women as wives. This is not cruelty, though it might seem so to outsiders. It is practicality. It ensures that every child born in the stronghold carries the chief's strength. It prevents the weak from diluting the bloodline. It maintains order in a society that could otherwise tear itself apart with petty rivalries and jealousies. The other males, the ones not born as chief's sons, have a choice. They can stay and serve. They can leave and seek their fortune elsewhere, or they can challenge the chief for leadership. Most choose the first option. Serving the stronghold is honorable work. There is no shame in being a hunter, a guard, a miner. The shame comes only from weakness, from failure, from breaking the code. I chose to serve. For 20 years, I bent over my forge and made weapons for warriors greater than myself. I watched the chief age and weaken. I watched his sons jockey for position, each one knowing that eventually they would have to fight each other for the right to rule. I kept my head down and my hammer moving and told myself that this was enough, that this was my place. I was lying to myself. I know that now. There was a woman. Her name was Sharamph, and she had been brought to Largashbur from Mor Kazgur as part of a trade agreement between chiefs. She was to become Yamatz's fourth wife. She was young and strong and carried herself like she had swallowed fire. The first time I saw her, something cracked inside my chest. Something I had spent my whole life pretending was not there. We did not speak, not at first. What would be the point? She belonged to the chief. I was a forge hand, a maker of tools for better orcs. But we found ourselves in the same spaces more often than chance would allow. She would bring blades to me for sharpening that did not need sharpening. I would linger near the cooking fires when I had no reason to linger. We learned each other's rhythms without ever learning each other's words. I noticed things about her. The way she hummed while working, an old orcish tune that my own mother used to sing. The way she moved, efficient and graceful, wasting no motion. The way her eyes went distant sometimes, looking at something no one else could see. She was not happy in Largashbur. That much was obvious. But unhappiness is not unusual among the wives. It is almost expected. You learn to bury it, like everything else. What I saw in her was different. Not just unhappiness, defiance. A small, banked fire that refused to go out no matter how much the stronghold tried to smother it. She reminded me of myself, in a way, of the smith who shaped blades for warriors he knew he could never be. We were both pretending to accept our places. We were both failing. The first time we spoke, truly spoke, was during a giant attack. One of the great fools had wandered too close to our walls, and the warriors went out to drive it back. In the chaos, Sharamph was knocked from the parapet. I caught her, my hands on her arms, her eyes on my face. In that moment, the battle did not exist. The stronghold did not exist. There was only the two of us, tangled together in the mud while the world burned around us. She said my name, just my name. But the way she said it told me everything I needed to know and everything I was forbidden to want. We were careful. Malacath sees all, the wise women say. But even Malacath cannot see what happens in the deep shadows of the mine. I told myself it was not betrayal. The chief had not touched her in months. She was a political pawn, not a true wife. These were the lies I built my happiness upon, and like all lies, they had cracks I refused to see. It lasted one season. One perfect, terrible season of stolen moments and whispered promises. I told her I would challenge Yamaz. I told her I would become chief and make her my true wife, my only wife. I told her that our children would inherit the stronghold and grow up knowing they were wanted, not just tolerated. I believed every word. That is the worst part. I truly believed I could win. The challenge came on the first day of Frostfall. I stood before the entire stronghold and spoke the words that cannot be taken back. I declared Yamaz unfit to lead. I declared myself his better. I demanded the right of combat. The chief laughed. I remember that laugh. It sounded like stones grinding together. He was old, yes, weaker than he had been, but he was still Chief Yamas of Largashbor. He had killed 17 challengers before me. He had earned his position through blood and bone and the kind of violence that leaves scars on your soul. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. I landed exactly 2 blows. The first glanced off his shoulder, the second split his lip and cost him a tooth. For one heartbeat, I thought I might actually win. Then his fist connected with my ribs, and the world turned to pain. He beat me methodically, not in rage, but in cold, calculated efficiency. Every strike was designed to teach a lesson, to the stronghold watching, to me, to anyone who might ever think of challenging him again. He broke me in pieces while everyone I had ever known stood silent and watched. When it was over, when I could not even crawl anymore, he stood over me and pronounced judgment. I had challenged and failed. The code demanded my exile. My name was stripped. My status was erased. I was no longer awesomer. I was nothing. I was to be cast out with only the clothes on my back and left to the mercy of the wild. Sharamph did not look at me as they dragged me to the gates. She could not afford to. Any show of sympathy would mark her as my accomplice, would bring the same judgment down on her head. I understood this. I even appreciated it, in a way. At least one of us would survive. They threw me into the snow as the sun was setting. The gates closed, and I was alone for the first time in my 32 years of life. That first night nearly killed me. I found a hollow beneath a fallen tree and crawled inside like a wounded animal. The cold was a living thing, pressing against me from all directions, searching for any gap in my thin clothing. I shivered so hard I thought my cracked ribs would tear through my skin. I did not sleep. I could not. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt myself slipping away, and some desperate animal part of me screamed that sleep meant death. When dawn finally came, I was still alive. I did not feel grateful. I felt angry. At myself. At Yamas. At the code that had made this my fate. At Sharamph, even though she had done nothing wrong. Anger was the only warmth I had left. I started walking again, toward the Rift's roads, toward Riften. I had heard stories of orcs finding work there, in the Thieves' Guild, or the fisheries. It seemed as good a destination as any, better than freezing to death in the mountains, better than being found by a bear or a saber cat. At least in Riften, I might die with a roof over my head. The journey took 8 days. I should not have survived it. On the second day, I found a dead hunter. Bandits, probably. They had taken his weapons and his coin but left his boots. The boots did not fit. They were Nord-sized, too wide and too long. But I stuffed them with moss and pine needles and they kept the frostbite from claiming my toes. I also took his flint and steel. His water skin. A half-eaten loaf of bread that had frozen solid. These things saved my life. I try not to think about the man who died so I could have them. On the 4th day, I caught a rabbit. Not with any skill or cunning. The creature was sick, slow, barely able to move. I caught it with my bare hands and killed it with a rock. I had no knife to clean it, so I tore it apart with my fingers and tusks and ate the meat raw. It tasted like survival. It tasted like shame. The Nords I passed on the road gave me wide berths. They saw an orc in rags, wild-eyed and desperate, and they reached for their weapons without thinking. I did not blame them. I would have done the same. We are taught to fear the other. All of us. The orcs fear the Nords. The Nords fear the orcs. And in the spaces between our fears, violence grows like weeds. One group of travelers threw stones at me, not to kill, just to drive me away from their camp. I let them. What else could I do? I was one half-starved exile against 4 armed men. Pride would have gotten me killed. Pride had already gotten me exiled. I was learning to live without it. On the 6th day, I encountered other travelers. Not Nords this time. A Khajiit caravan making its way south, loaded with goods they could not sell in cities that refused to let their caravans trade inside the walls. They saw me stumbling through the snow, and they stopped. Not out of kindness, exactly. More like recognition. They knew what I was. They had seen my kind before, the discarded ones, the unwanted. Their leader, an older caravan master with silver fur and knowing eyes, offered me a place by their fire for the night. I was too exhausted to be suspicious. I collapsed beside the flames and felt warmth for the first time in almost a week. It burned. My fingers and toes screamed as blood returned to them. But it was a good pain. a pain that meant I was still alive. The Khajiit did not ask my story. They did not need to. They simply fed me, let me sleep, and in the morning, pointed me toward the rift, with directions that probably saved my life. There is a shortcut through the mountains, the elder told me. Dangerous, but faster. Stay to the left when the path forks. Watch for bears. I never saw them again. I never had the chance to repay their kindness, but I think about them sometimes. About how the ones who helped me most in those early days were not my own people. They were others like me. Outcasts by a different name. Riften was worse than I had imagined. The city crouched beside its lake like a predator waiting to strike. The buildings leaned against each other as if for support, rotting from the inside out. The smell hit me before I even reached the gates. Fish and sewage and desperation. This was not a city. This was a wound that had learned to walk and talk and call itself civilization. The guards stopped me at the entrance. Of course they did. An orc with no weapons, no coin, no name worth speaking. I might as well have been wearing a sign that said trouble. They searched me roughly, found nothing, and let me pass with a warning. Stay out of the nice parts of the city. Stay out of trouble. Stay out of sight. I found work on the docks within a day. Not skilled work, not forge work, just hauling crates and barrels from ships to warehouses. The pay was terrible. 3 septims a day, barely enough for a single meal at the worst tavern in the Ratway. But it was work. It was a reason to exist. And it kept me too exhausted to think about everything I had lost. The labor was brutal. 16 hours a day, sometimes more. Barrels of salted fish that weighed as much as a grown man. Crates of goods from Morrowind, from Cyrodiil, from places I had only heard about in stories. My hands blistered and bled until they formed calluses hard as horn. My back screamed at me every night. But the pain was good. The pain was real. It reminded me that I still had a body, even if I no longer had a name. There were other labourers, of course. Mostly Argonians, their scales dull from years of work and poor food. A few Dunmer refugees, their red eyes hollow with memories of the Red Year. Some Nords too poor or too broken to find better work. We did not talk much. There was no energy for conversation. But there was a kind of solidarity in shared suffering, a nod at the end of a long shift, a hand offered when someone stumbled, small kindnesses that cost nothing and meant everything. The other dock workers tolerated me. They did not like me. They made that clear enough. But I could lift what 3 of them struggled to carry, and that earned me a grudging respect. The foreman, a fat Breton named Valentin, appreciated anyone who made his numbers look good. He did not care if I was an orc. He did not care if I was a Daedra in disguise. As long as the cargo moved, I was useful. I slept in a storage shed behind the fishery. The owner charged me 1 septim a night for the privilege of not turning me out. It smelled like rotting salmon and rat droppings. The wind came through the gaps in the boards like knives. But it was shelter. It was more than the code had left me. Weeks passed. Then months. I fell into a rhythm of work and exhaustion and dreamless sleep. The anger that had kept me alive began to fade, replaced by something duller, something grey. I was existing. That was all. Not living, not dying, just existing. Like a stone at the bottom of a river, worn smooth by the current. The other orcs in Riften avoided me. This surprised me at first, until I understood. To them, I was cursed. Exile is not just punishment, it is contamination. An outcast carries the stain of their failure with them. Anyone who associates too closely risks catching that stain. So they looked away when I passed. They found reasons to be elsewhere when I was nearby. They pretended I did not exist, and in doing so, they confirmed what the code had already declared. I was nothing. There was one exception. An old orc named Gorbash who ran a second-hand goods stall in the market. He had been exiled himself, decades ago, for reasons he never shared. He had survived, built something resembling a life. He did not befriend me exactly. Friendship is too strong a word. But he spoke to me, nodded when I passed. Once, when I was particularly desperate, he gave me a day-old loaf of bread and pretended not to notice my hands shaking as I took it. He told me something I have never forgotten. We were sheltering from a rainstorm beneath his stall's awning, watching the water turn the streets to mud. I asked him if it ever got easier. Being cast out, being nothing. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said that it does not get easier. You just get harder. You build walls inside yourself, and eventually the pain cannot reach you anymore. But the walls do not just keep pain out, they keep everything out. By the time you stop hurting, you have stopped feeling altogether. And that, he said, is its own kind of death. I did not believe him then. I was young enough and angry enough to think I would be different, that I would find my way back to something real, that exile was a chapter, not an ending. I believe him now. The turning point came in my second year in Riften. I had graduated from the docks to guard work, not city guard, nothing so respectable, private security for one of the merchant families who traded in goods that did not bear close inspection, skooma, mostly, some stolen merchandise. The kind of work that pays well because no one with options would take it. The family was Dunmer, dark elves who had fled Morrowind after the Red Year and rebuilt their fortunes through means the law preferred not to examine too closely. They hired me because I was big, because I was desperate, and because an orc with nothing to lose makes an excellent deterrent. The irony was not lost on me. Back in Largashbur, the Dunmer were enemies, slavers who had kept our ancestors in chains for centuries. Now I worked for them, protecting their interests, doing their violence. The world has a bitter sense of humor. My job was simple: stand in dark places and look threatening. If someone caused trouble, I was to make them regret it. Not kill them, usually. Just hurt them enough to send a message. I was good at it. All those years of being bigger and stronger and angrier than everyone around me finally had a purpose. One night, a group of Nords decided they did not want to pay their debts. There were 5 of them, drunk and armed and confident in their numbers. They thought they could intimidate their way out of the obligation. They did not know that I had stopped caring about my own survival months ago. I put 3 of them on the ground before the others ran. One of them I hit so hard his jaw came loose from its socket. The sound it made still echoes in my dreams. Not with horror, that is the worst part. With satisfaction. I had become the beast they always expected me to be. After that, my reputation grew. The merchant family recommended me to others. Soon I was in demand. The orc, who was not afraid to break bones. The exile with nothing to lose. They paid me well, they respected my work, but they never once looked at me like I was a person. I saved every septim I did not need to survive. I told myself I was building toward something, a forge of my own, maybe, a way back to the life I had lost. But really, I think I just needed to believe there was a future. The coins piling up in their hidden stash were proof that time was still passing, that I was still here. Sometimes, late at night, I would count them by candlelight. 100 septims, 200, 500. Each coin represented a day I had survived, a day the Stronghold had expected me to die. There was a grim satisfaction in that, in proving them wrong, one tiny piece of metal at a time. I learned things about myself in those dark years. I learned that I was stronger than I had ever believed. Not physically, though that was true as well, but inside, in the place where hope lives and dies. I had thought, when they cast me out, that losing my identity would destroy me, that without a name, without a people, I would simply cease to exist. Instead, I discovered that there was something beneath all that, something harder, something that survived when everything else was stripped away. I am not sure if that discovery was a blessing or a curse. 3 years after my exile, I received word that Chief Yamards was dead. Not from a challenger. Word reached me that he had gone after a giant camp near Largashbur, seeking to prove his strength after years of declining health. He did not come back. Some said the giant killed him with a single blow. Others whispered darker things about what really happened in those hills. I do not know the truth. I only know that he is dead, and I am not. Malacath named Gulazob chief after Yamards fell. The stronghold endured. The code continued. And I, halfway across Skyrim, felt something twist inside me that I thought had died long ago. Sharamph. What had happened to Sharamph? I could not ask directly. No one from the stronghold would speak to me. But information moves through Riften like water through a sieve. A bribe here, a favor there, and eventually I learned the truth. She had been given to Gulazob as part of his inheritance. She was his wife now, as she had been his father's. She had borne him a daughter. She was, by all accounts, content. I should have been happy for her. I should have been relieved that she had found stability, safety, a place in the world I had tried and failed to give her. Instead, I felt nothing. That grey emptiness that had been growing inside me swallowed the news whole. She was alive. She had moved on. And I was still here, breaking bones for coin, sleeping in rented rooms that smelled like mildew and regret. Gorbash had been right. The walls I had built were complete, and I was trapped on the wrong side of them. I am 32 years old now. 5 winters since my exile. I still work in Riften. I have a room above a tavern, a small one, but my own. I have a forge in the basement that the owner lets me use when I can afford the coal. Sometimes I make things, simple things, hinges and nails and tools, nothing like the blades I used to craft, nothing that matters. The other day, a young orc came to the city. Fresh from a stronghold, you could tell. He still walked like someone who belonged somewhere. He was looking for work, he said, looking to make his way in the wider world before returning home to challenge for chiefdom. He asked me about my life, where I came from, what stronghold had shaped me. I saw the curiosity in his eyes, the assumption that I was like him, an orc with a history, an orc with a name. I told him I had no stronghold, that I was no one from nowhere. The look on his face when he understood, when he realized what I was, is something I will carry with me for a long time. It was not disgust, exactly. It was worse. It was pity mixed with fear. The look you give a corpse that has not yet learned it is dead. He left quickly after that, made his excuses and hurried away. I do not blame him. I would have done the same, once. This is what exile truly means, you see. It is not just losing your home. It is not just losing your name. It is becoming something that other orcs cannot afford to see. We are already outcasts to the other races. The Nords call us beasts. The elves call us corrupted. The Empire tolerates us only barely. Our strongholds are all we have. They are the proof that we are a people, not just scattered monsters. An exile threatens that. I am living evidence that the stronghold can fail you, that the code, for all its brutal logic, produces outcomes that serve no one. Every orc who looks at me has to wonder, even for a moment, whether the same fate awaits them. And that wondering is dangerous. It corrodes the faith that holds everything together. So they do not look. They pretend I do not exist. And eventually, I begin to believe them. There are others like me in Riften, more than you might think. We find each other eventually, in the low places where no one else goes. Dunmer refugees from Morrowind, Khajiit banned from the cities, Argonians worked half to death on the docks. We are all exiles in our own way, all cast out from the places that were supposed to be home. We do not form a community. That would be too much like hope. But we acknowledge each other. A nod across a crowded tavern, a shared silence in a dark alley, the understanding that passes between those who have been broken and have not quite managed to die. I have thought about ending it. I will not lie to you. There have been nights when the grey emptiness felt so vast that I could not imagine filling it with anything. When the easy way out seemed like the only way out, I have stood on bridges and counted my breaths, waited for something to push me one way or the other. I am still here. Not because of hope, not because of strength. I am still here because of spite, because Yamas threw me into the snow and expected me to die, and some small, vicious part of me refuses to give him that satisfaction. Even now, even with him dead and gone, I will outlive his memory out of pure stubborn rage. That is not a noble reason to live, but it is the only one I have left. If you are listening to this, if you have followed my story this far, I need you to understand something. The strongholds are not evil. The Code of Malacath is not cruelty for its own sake. These systems exist because the Orsimer have been beaten down so many times, betrayed so many times, that we have learned to trust nothing but our own strength. The walls we build around our homes are the same walls we build around our hearts. They keep us alive. They keep us separate. And sometimes, they crush us. I do not regret challenging Yamas. I regret failing. Those are different things. If I had won, if I had become chief, I would have enforced the same code that destroyed me. I would have exiled others. I would have become the very thing I now despise. The system does not allow for alternatives. You are either inside the walls or outside them. You are either Orsimer or nothing. Sharamph made her choice. She chose survival. She chose the walls. I cannot hate her for that. I can only envy her the clarity. The snow is falling again tonight. I can see it through my window, drifting down like ashes from a fire long since burned out. It reminds me of that first night, the cold, the pain, the absolute certainty that I would not survive until morning. I survived. I keep surviving, and I am not sure anymore if that is victory or defeat. Malacath teaches that strength is the only virtue, that the strong take what they need and the weak perish. But what happens when strength is not enough? What happens when you fight as hard as you can and still lose? The code has no answer for that. It just casts you out and moves on. I am what the stronghold cast away. And here, in this rotten city, surrounded by others who have been cast away, I am finally beginning to understand something. We are not the failures. We are the proof that the system itself is broken. That strength alone is not enough. That belonging cannot be earned only through violence. I will not return to Largashba. I could not, even if I wanted to. But somewhere, someday, an orc will be born who looks at the code and asks why, who sees the exiles in the cities and wonders if there is a better way, who has the strength I lacked and the wisdom I never found. Maybe that orc will build something new, a place where strength is not the only measure of worth, a place where failure does not mean erasure, a place where an old smith can teach the young without fear of losing everything. I dream of that place sometimes. I know it will never exist in my lifetime. But the dreaming is enough. It has to be. When that orc comes, I hope they remember us. The ones who fell, the ones who were cast out, the ones who froze in the snow so the strongholds could pretend they were perfect. We were awesomer once. We had names. We had worth. And no matter what the code says, no matter what Malacath demands, that is something no one can ever truly take away. This is my story. It is not a tale of victory or redemption. It is simply a tale of survival, which is the only kind of story an outcast ever gets to tell. The snow keeps falling, and somewhere, behind walls I will never see again, my people continue their brutal, beautiful, broken existence. I hope they find what I could not.